been thinking about whether to tell this story for a long time. Not because I'm ashamed of it, I'm past shame, but because some parts of it still sting in that quiet way that old wounds do, not sharp anymore, just present. I'm 63 years old. I have reading glasses. I lose 3 times a day, a garden that's doing better than it has any right to, and a very opinionated cat named Fig. I also have a life that looks completely different from the one I was living 4 years ago. And most days I think that's the best thing that ever happened to me, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to start with my husband. My ex-husband. His name was Philip. Philip was the kind of man who filled a room. Not because he was loud. He wasn't, actually. He was measured, deliberate. He had this way of speaking slowly enough that everyone assumed whatever he said was worth waiting for. In the early years, I found it magnetic. Later, I understood it was a performance. But by the time I understood that, I'd already built 23 years of my life around it. We met when I was in my late 30s. I'd been working in healthcare administration for almost 15 years, managing billing and compliance for a mid-sized orthopedic group in Columbus. I was good at my job. I was detail-oriented, good with numbers, good at reading people. I had my own apartment, my own savings account, my own Thursday night book club. Philip came into my life at a work conference. He was a commercial real estate developer, already doing well. Confident, attentive in a way that felt like being chosen. Looking back, I think I was at an age where society had started quietly suggesting I should be grateful for that kind of attention. I wasn't desperate, but I wasn't immune to the message either. We married 2 years later. I moved into his house, his world. For the first few years, it was fine. More than fine, I thought. We traveled. He made a good living. We had dinners with colleagues and neighbors and his golf friends and their wives. I learned to host a table for 12 without breaking a sweat. I learned to make conversation with men who spoke mostly about interest rates and zoning variances. I learned to laugh at the right moments and be quiet at others. What I didn't realize, not all at once, not in a single moment, was that I had slowly stopped being a person with my own story and started being a supporting character in his. It happened in increments. He'd suggest I not bring up my job at dinner parties because it bored people. He'd answer questions directed at me before I could open my mouth. When I started mentioning that I wanted to go back to school for a health informatics degree, he smiled and said, "At your age, be realistic." I was 51. I stopped mentioning it. The thing about that kind of slow erosion is that you adapt to it. You find workarounds. You fill the time he doesn't see with things he doesn't know about. That's how I found Korean. It started, of all things, with a documentary, a travel program about South Korea that came on late one night when I couldn't sleep. I watched the whole thing, all 90 minutes. Something about it stayed with me. The food, the architecture, the pace of life in Seoul. I ordered a library book about the country, then another, then, almost on a whim, a beginner's Korean workbook from the local bookstore. Philip travelled 4 days out of every week. Business mostly, though I later learned not all of it was business. When he was gone, I sat at the kitchen table with my workbook and a cup of tea, and I practiced Hangul like a woman with nowhere else to be. I want to say I had some grand plan. I didn't. It was just mine. That's the whole of it. In a life where I had quietly handed over most of my time and attention and opinions, this was something he didn't know about and hadn't weighed in on, and that made it feel like breathing. I kept at it for over 2 years. I found a tutor online, a young woman named Ms. Marthy Park, who was patient and funny and never once made me feel foolish for being a grandmother-aged woman practicing verb conjugations on a Tuesday afternoon. I listened to Korean radio programs in the car. I watched Korean dramas with subtitles on, then without. I was not fluent, not by a long shot, but I was solid, conversational. I could follow a fast exchange and catch most of it. I could respond clearly in slow, careful sentences that landed correctly. Philip never knew. He never asked what I did with my days. That's the honest truth of it. The dinner happened in October. About 8 months ago now. Philip had been cultivating a relationship with a South Korean investment group for nearly a year. They were looking at a mixed-use development opportunity in the Nashville corridor, something large enough that it would have been the biggest deal of his career. He'd been careful with this. He'd even, I discovered later, hired a cultural consultant to coach him on protocol. When the lead partner, Mr. Cho, came to Columbus for a site visit, Philip arranged a dinner at a private dining room at a restaurant downtown. A nice one, the kind with cloth napkins that get refolded when you leave the table. He asked me to come. Just be there, he told me on the way over, and there was something in his tone that made it clear I was not being invited as his wife, so much as being deployed as a prop, someone who looked presentable and wouldn't embarrass him. I'll probably be doing most of the talking in Korean, he added, which was true. He'd learned some business Korean from the consultant and was quite proud of it. You'll likely be out of the loop for stretches. Just smile. I said I would. There were 6 of us at the table. Philip, me, Mr. Barry, Cho and his associate, a younger man named Mr. Yoon, and 2 of Philip's business associates, a man named Ted and his wife, whose name I genuinely cannot remember even now, which tells you something about the dynamic. The meal began pleasantly enough. They ordered in English to start, talked about the drive from the airport, the weather, the renovation work downtown. Mr. Cho was gracious and soft-spoken. Mr. Yoon was quieter, watching more than talking. Ted held court on restaurant recommendations. Philip performed his warmth. Then Philip and Mr. Cho shifted into Korean, not all at once. It drifted that direction naturally, the way conversation does when 2 people share a language and forget or stop caring about the others at the table. Ted's wife and I exchanged a few polite comments about the bread. I sipped my water. I listened. My Korean was enough. It was more than enough. Philip was telling Mr. Cho in Korean that the site visit had gone well and that he believed the partnership would be mutually beneficial. Standard enough. But then Mr. Cho asked something, gently, the way he seemed to do everything, about Philip's family situation, whether he was settled, stable. There was a cultural weight to the question that Philip's consultant had probably briefed him on. Korean business culture often prioritizes knowing the whole person, the foundation beneath a professional surface. Philip laughed. A relaxed, easy laugh. And then, in Korean, he said something that I will not forget for as long as I live. He said that his wife, me, sitting not 4 feet away, was not someone he needed to concern himself with. That she was, he said, using a phrase I recognized from my dramas, essentially a kept woman, that she had no real career, no real ambitions, that she was comfortable and content and would stay that way as long as the credit card worked. He said this the way you might describe a piece of furniture you decided to keep because replacing it was more trouble than it was worth. Mr. Cho's expression didn't change. He nodded slightly. Said something quiet. Philip went on. He mentioned, still in Korean, still in the same easy tone, that he kept a separate investment account that he hadn't disclosed in their shared finances. He was talking about it in the context of his personal assets, his stability, what he could bring to the table. He thought he was demonstrating strength. He was, in reality, confessing. I sat with my hands in my lap. I watched the candle on the table. I breathed. Tape was telling a story about a golf trip on my right side, and I nodded at the appropriate moments. I kept my face exactly where I needed to keep it. The thing that people don't understand about hearing something like that is that there's a moment, a split second, where you have a choice, fall apart or stay. And I had spent decades learning to hold myself very still. I stayed. Mr. Cho glanced at me once during this exchange. It was brief, almost nothing, but something in it was different from a polite glance. It was attentive, careful. I wasn't certain what it meant. Later I would understand. About 40 minutes into the dinner, the conversation shifted back toward the table at large. Philip was wrapping up a point about projected returns. He seemed pleased with himself. He reached over and touched my hand in that proprietary way he had, the gesture that was meant to look affectionate, but always felt like someone touching a piece of their own property. Mr. Cho turned to me directly then. He asked in English whether I had any thoughts on the Nashville market. Philip made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite dismissive, something in between, an intercept. He started to answer for me. I spoke first. I said in Korean that I appreciated him asking, that from what I understood, the demographic trends in that corridor were favorable for mixed-use development, though I had some questions about the zoning variance timeline that I imagined had already been discussed. I said it slowly and clearly, careful grammar. I made sure every word landed where I intended it. The table went very quiet. Philip's face did something I had never seen it do before. It seemed to reorganize, cycle through several expressions too quickly for any of them to settle. He stared at me. He looked, for the first time in 23 years, like he had no idea who I was. He didn't. He never had. Mr. Cho looked at me with an expression that was warm and entirely unsurprised. He responded in Korean. He told me my pronunciation was quite good, that he had suspected from early in the meal that I might understand more than I appeared to. The tea was glad to meet me properly now. I thanked him. I said it was a pleasure. Philip said nothing. Ted said nothing. The other associates seemed to be studying the table setting with great interest. Then Mr. Cho said something else, still in Korean. He said, and I'm paraphrasing because the language was formal, that trust was something he considered carefully in business partnerships, that he valued knowing the character of the people he worked with. That character, in his experience, showed itself most clearly not in what a man said when he was trying to impress, but in what he said when he thought no one was listening. He looked at Philip when he said it. Philip's face went the color of old ash. Mr. Cho turned back to me. He asked very politely whether I might be interested in speaking further about the project over coffee before he left Columbus. I said I would enjoy that very much. Dinner ended not long after. The conversation reconvened in English, stiff and brief. Philip spoke less in those final 20 minutes than I had ever heard him speak at a social event. On the drive home, he said nothing for the first 12 minutes. I counted. Then he said, "You never told me you spoke Korean." I said, "You never asked." He was quiet for another stretch. "How long?" "Long enough," I said. I did have coffee with Mr. Cho the following morning at the hotel restaurant near the convention center. We spoke mostly in English, some Korean. He was thoughtful and courteous and treated me like someone with something worth saying. He asked about my background in healthcare administration. He mentioned that his group had a portfolio company that was expanding in the US and had been looking for someone with compliance and billing oversight experience. We exchanged cards. He said he would be in touch. Philip did not get the deal. I found out later through my own attorney, not through Philip, that the investment group had declined to move forward with the partnership. The official language was vague, something about strategic alignment. Mr. Strategic Alignment. Yoon, the associate who had been quietly observing all evening, apparently wrote the summary that recommended against proceeding. The word used, I was told, was reliability. What happened after the dinner happened the way these things do when they've been building for a long time. Not in a single dramatic moment, more like something that had been held together with the wrong materials finally giving way. I called my sister in Phoenix the morning after the coffee with Mr. Cho. She's 70 now, a retired schoolteacher, and she has a gift for saying the thing that is true without making you feel worse than you already do. I told her what had happened, all of it, including the parts I'd been carrying around quietly for years. The account I'd found while filing our taxes 18 months earlier that I hadn't understood and hadn't been able to prove. The way his business trips had multiplied in frequency over the past 2 years. She listened, then she said, "You already know what you're going to do." She was right. I did. I hired an attorney the following week. A woman named, well, Her name isn't the point. She was excellent. That's the point. She was experienced in high-asset divorce and did not seem at all surprised by anything I told her. The account Philip had mentioned to Mr. Parsd, Cho, casually in what he assumed was a private language, had to be disclosed in the divorce proceedings. You can't mention a separate financial account to a potential business partner in one breath and then claim it doesn't exist in the court filing. His own words had already established it. My attorney was very pleased about that detail. The divorce took 14 months. There were 3 difficult stretches and 1 mediation session that I thought might break something in me, but didn't. Philip hired a lawyer who liked to use the word aggressive as a compliment. Mine liked to use the word thorough. I'll let you guess which approach served us better. I won't go into the specifics of the settlement. That's private. But I will say that the life I have now, the house, the financial independence, the ability to pay for my own garden and my own cat and my own reading glasses that I lose 3 times a day, that came out of the other side of those 14 months. The job inquiry from Mr. Cho's contact came through about 6 months into the divorce proceedings. It was for a compliance oversight consultant position, part-time to start. I said yes. It suited my experience exactly. The work is interesting, and the team is entirely professional. I am not an anecdote to any of them. I am a colleague. My Korean is better now. Ms. Park says I have reached the point where I'm probably conversational, which she says with the particular satisfaction of someone who has been watching a slow plant finally bloom. I think about Philip sometimes. Not the way I used to. More the way you think about weather that was once very bad. It happened. It shaped things. It passed. I think about that dinner table more often, the candle, the way the cloth napkins had little folded points, the sound of my own voice, slow and careful, saying something true in a language I wasn't supposed to know. Mr. Cho's expression when he realized, the way Philip's face reorganized. I have been invisible in a room full of people who assumed I had nothing worth saying. I know what that feels like from the inside. I know how much can happen behind a quiet face. I know that silence is not the same as emptiness. If you are listening to this and you are in a marriage where you have started to feel like furniture, like something that is kept around because replacing it is inconvenient, I want you to hear this. That feeling is information. It is telling you something true about where you are. You don't have to make a dramatic announcement. You don't have to win an argument. You don't have to prove anything to anyone in real time. You can just learn something small and patient, something that belongs entirely to you. And then you can wait for the moment when it matters. It will come. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that dinner. Not in any cosmic or religious sense. I'm too practical for that. But in the plain, observable way that choices accumulate, the way one decision stacks on top of another until you can trace a clear line from who someone is to what eventually finds them. Philip made a choice every single day of our marriage. Small choices mostly. The choice to answer for me, instead of letting me speak. The choice to dismiss an idea of mine before it finished leaving my mouth. The choice to sit across from a business partner he wanted to impress and describe his wife, me, right there, in the same room, as someone who required no consideration. He made that choice because he had made every smaller version of it for 23 years, and no one had ever interrupted the pattern. He thought language was a wall. He thought I was on the other side of it. That's the thing about underestimating someone quietly over a long time. It doesn't make them smaller. It just means you stop paying attention. And when you stop paying attention, you stop being careful. And when you stop being careful, you say true things out loud in rooms where you should have stayed silent. Philip didn't lose that deal because of bad luck. He lost it because Mr. Cho is the kind of man who listens carefully and draws conclusions from what he actually sees, not what he's told to see. What Mr. Cho saw over the course of one dinner was a man who would betray the person closest to him without hesitation and then call that confidence. That's not a business partner. That's a liability. There's something I keep coming back to, and it has to do with the years I spent at that kitchen table with my workbook and my tea, practicing a language nobody knew I was learning. I wasn't plotting anything. I wasn't planning a confrontation. I was just doing something that belonged entirely to me, something quiet and patient and completely outside his reach. I think that's what resilience actually looks like most of the time. Not dramatic, not loud. It looks like a woman in her late 50s, sitting alone in her own kitchen, building something she doesn't yet know she'll need. It looks like Ms. Park waiting for me to find the right verb and not filling the silence for me. It looks like staying at a dinner table when every nerve in your body wants to leave, because you understand that the moment isn't right yet, and you have learned, finally, at 60, to trust your own timing. The intelligence I'm most grateful for isn't the Korean. It's the intelligence I had to grow into, knowing when to speak and when to wait, knowing that a quiet face is not the same as an absent mind, knowing that the most powerful thing I said at that dinner was the first thing, and that it landed exactly as hard as it did, because I had waited long enough. Philip is a cautionary story about what happens when a person confuses access with ownership. He had my time, my presence, my patience for over 2 decades. He mistook all of that for the whole of me. The account he hid, the words he said, the deal he lost. None of it was bad luck. It was the natural end of a long chain of choices that had always been pointing there. I am 63 years old. I have work I find genuinely interesting. I have a sister who tells me true things. I have a garden and the cat and a language that was mine alone before it became the thing that changed everything. I don't need anyone to tell me I made the right call. I already know.